From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to OpenLine. I'm Carrie Sharp. Thank you for being with us once again tonight. Tonight, we are talking about what is on the mind of a lot of folks, including me right now. We've been covering it in the news almost nonstop, and that is the war in Ukraine right now, launched by Russia. And our guest tonight, who is going to help us wade through all of this, is Dr. John Vile. He is the Dean and a political science professor at MTSU. Dr. Vile, thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
We were just talking before we went on. I was saying how I just happened to be out running errands this morning and sat down next to a woman who is from Ukraine, and her fear and panic for her father and sister who are still there, it was palpable. It was really palpable. And you were saying that you're working on setting up a forum with some professors and a student from Ukraine there at MTSU.
I am. We have a history professor, a political science professor, and then we have a graduate student in finance who's going to be Wednesday night. We're going to have a forum at the Honors College. You know what? One of the things that's really fascinating about this is it puts into perspective a lot of things that we know about history, but we haven't directly experienced. And I was talking to someone today about, people today say we're so stressed over COVID and we're so stressed over, mask wearing and this and that. And then you think back, and I guess my grandparents, I know, lived through the Great Depression, and it was quickly followed by, the German invasion of Europe, World War II, the beginning of the Cold War, the development of the atom bomb, the hydrogen bomb. And frankly, it doesn't seem like we've come that far, does it? It seems like history may be repeating itself.
Oh, most certainly it does. And it does really put things in perspective when you think about, the things that we've been squabbling about when it comes to COVID and continue to squabble about 2 years into this. And then you look at what's happening in Ukraine. And even as we speak, the Russians are really surrounding Kyiv right now. And I want to get into that a little bit. But I also just think about when you talk about a professor there and students there at Ukraine. We interviewed a professor who is from Ukraine, still has family there at Austin Peay today, that, Ukraine and Russia seem really far away, yet they're not. Many Ukrainians are part of American culture and a part of our American lives.
But, we're a nation of immigrants, and I didn't realize, frankly, how many Ukrainians live in the United States. But Ukraine is a little bit like Ireland, or Scotland is a great example of people who for hundreds of years have gone all over the world seeking a better life. And, many of them are here in the United States. We do not, to Ukraine's disadvantage, they are not currently a member of NATO. And so we do not have a treaty obligation to them. On the other hand, developments there, it pushes, if Russia is successful, it pushes their sphere of influence closer to the nations that are in NATO. And, one of the great effects, of course, is going to be, and, we've seen some of this in the war in Syria. That seemed a little farther away, Middle East, maybe we shouldn't, but we sort of expect things like that in Middle East and Africa and South America in a way that we don't expect them to be in Europe. But we're probably looking, potentially, certainly hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of refugees. And, much of Western Europe has already been somewhat roiled by, how many can they absorb? Are they taking away jobs? Often many of the refugees from Syria, of course, have been Muslim, and Europe is predominantly Christian. So, all of these things are going to need to be sorted out. And, whether it's certainly we're giving military aid, but we're probably going to have to give substantial humanitarian aid and aid to, countries like Poland, maybe Romania, maybe some others that are, going to be taking these refugees.
Yeah, the UN already saying they estimate about 500,000 refugees already, and we are just a few days in. I do want to jump to the lines real quick. We have Gilbert waiting to chime in on this topic. Gilbert, you're on. Go ahead with your question or comment.
Yes, ma'am. Just a comment. I bless the people in Ukraine. My heart is with them. That's all I can say about that. as far as the United States, we need to become non-dependent on these foreign countries, and people are seeing now, I hope they're waking up and seeing what being dependent on foreign countries is doing to us. We need to be, piping our own oil and taking care of ourselves and not be dependent. And I'm going to leave it alone. If that fella there's got something to say about it, I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Gilbert. Professor Vile, what do you think are the lessons that we should, or at least the things that we should really be paying attention to right now?
Well, to what Gilbert, much of what Gilbert says is correct here, that, when it comes to strategic supplies, fortunately, we are in a much better position now with regard to oil dependency than we would have been, say, 20 years ago. Western Europe is not quite as blessed as we are in this regard. One of the things that, of course, has been stopped is this pipeline that was supposed to go directly from Russia to Germany. And Russia, we're enacting right now a lot of sanctions on Russia, but Russia has some means of retaliating, particularly if the weather turned very cold and Europeans needed fuel. So, our destiny is entwined with that of other nations, whether we want it to be or not. But there's certainly some strategic assets that, if the only source is China or Russia, then we probably, we need to dig our own wells or look for our own minerals, or, find trading agreements with countries that are more likely to be aligned with us ideologically.
Let's go to Mike as well. He's waiting patiently on the line. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Carrie, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good evening that's great. And good evening to the professor as well. I'll make three quick points. This is what I see happening, and this is part of what's happening with Ukraine. I'm seeing something worldwide where, like China, with the national security law that they imposed in Hong Kong, that's supposed to have a democracy based on an agreement with European countries. I see China trying to take control of Taiwan. Then you see Russia trying to take care of invade Ukraine like they did Crimea. And I just want to know your worldview. Why are these countries now, especially the autocrat type countries with dictators, are trying to gather up all their little sources into one big nugget? What are they anticipating on a worldview? What is their long game? What is their short game? And also, I think the sanctions should be a lot more stringent. I think as soon as Russia starts even thinking about invading Ukraine, we should have started implementing sanctions and not put up with bullies anymore, whether it's Trump or whether it's Putin or Xi Jinping. And I'll hang up and listen. Thank you.
Mike, great points you made there. And if I can just add to that, when we interviewed the professor at Austin Peay today, who is from Ukraine, still has family there, he said, and this really stuck with me, he said, this is not about Ukraine. This is about power. And Mike is getting to the same point. Do you agree with that?
Basically, I do. We went through sort of a halcyon period right after the fall of the Iron Curtain in 1989, when the world seemed to be trending democratic. Even Russia, there were some hopes that, once communism was overthrown, there would be a more democratic system. And right now, the autocrats seem to be, it seems to be clearer division between the democracies and the autocracies than there were previously. And I must say that part of this, I think it would have happened without him, but Trump seemed much more comfortable with autocratic governments than Obama and the Bush and those who had preceded. And I don't know if that gave something of a green light to them or not. I have yet to decide, I think it's yet to be decided exactly, well, partly depends on what happens here with this invasion. But would this invasion embolden China, for example, to attack Taiwan? Well, they've been making, they doing sort of mini aggressions against Taiwan for several years now. They're going to take advantage of any opportunity that they have. But, whether I think they feel like they're getting pulled a little bit into a conflict that they really don't want to be a part of right now.
And then Mike also brought up sanctions, and that is such a good point. We have seen more and more sanctions over the last couple of days, to the point today where now the banking system is a part of that.
Right.
Do sanctions work?
Well, let me start by saying I think I disagree with Mike, but I understand his point. The reason we didn't enact sanctions prior to the invasion was we wanted to make as clear a distinction as we could between a provoked and an unprovoked attack. And we were afraid that the sanctions itself would be used as a justification. Now I think no holes are barred. I think we need to do, whatever sanctions we need. Historically, sanctions haven't worked all that well, but this could be the exception. One of my favorite presidents was James Madison. My students think I remember him personally. I don't. But, when he was Secretary of State under Jefferson, he pushed even more strongly than Jefferson for trying to stop what became the War of 1812 by boycotting Britain. And it didn't work, basically because Britain was a superpower and we needed them more than they needed us. This may be a case where Russia Russia has a relatively weak economy, and they may be much more dependent on the rest of the world than we are on them. Now, the one great unknown, of course, is, and I think it's bluster. It's not the first time it's happened, but anytime the leader of a second, nuclear power starts talking about, well, I'm gonna bring on destruction like you've never seen before, it gives a little bit of pause. Probably bluster. But, economics, well, it's yet to be determined how successful they will be here. But certainly Russia does not look good in the court of public opinion right now, worldwide.
Certainly not. We have to take a quick break. We have Devitt and Robert also on the line, and we are just getting going with this conversation. So please stay where you are. If you have a question or comment, go ahead and give us a call. We'll get you lined up. 615-737-PLUS. We're coming right back.